Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to my shop. I believe that if you'll spend a few minutes with me today, together we can become better at creating things with our mind and making things with our hands. Today I decided we would take a look at what a joiner can do in terms of establishing our first flat surfaces on the boards that we've just bought that we're going to turn into a fine piece of furniture. What a joiner does is it's going to take our rough sawed piece of lumber here, and it's going to give us an opportunity to make this surface perfectly flat and square. We're going to start out by planing this side down or joining this side down. Then we're going to turn our board and we're going to joint the edges too. What we want to accomplish there is to take this piece of wood that's not flat and make it as perfectly flat as we can get it on this face and on this edge. We're going to call those a primary and secondary reference surfaces. So they will reference against our table saw and our planer to finish making this board nice and flat and straight. One of the first things we have to do is decide which surfaces we're going to work on to begin with. I'm going to look down this board and I can see that it's curved a little bit this way. So I'm going to draw my mark on there, which means I've got to take this high point and this high point off on the joiner in order to get this flat so it's not bowed in this direction. I can also look at it and I can see on the end here that I've got a crown in the board. So I'm going to take these two sides off and bring it down flat there. What I want to accomplish is a reference here, knowing that I always want to keep the bowed part of my material up when I'm planing it or joining it, so I can take the high points here and here down until it ends up being flat all the way across. When I take this over to my jointer, what I've got here is I've got an outfeed table that is fixed. I've got an in-feed table that is able to be raised and lowered to regulate how much of a cut we're going to take off from our piece. So I've got this set as a pretty shallow cut. I'm always going to keep my guard in place, and I know that my planer knives are coming at the piece this way, so as I'm feeding it, it's going to take some of that material off. It's basically self-feeding. We're the one that controls the feed rate on it and all. So I've got that set. I'm always going to use a push block, and I like to push block with a hook on the end to pull my material through. Where I want to be positioned is I want to be standing close enough to my machine to where all my weight is centered over my hips and down onto my feet. I want all my weight there, so if I'm back here, I've got my weight kind of cantilevered over the piece. That doesn't give me as much stability as I would like, so I always want to be up close, and I want to be behind my piece so I can get the best push on it. How to get my best position in terms of feeding this through my board is I want to put my block here. I want my hand to always to be facing up. That forces me to kind of come behind my piece and push it from here. If I do it the opposite way and I get my hand here, it pulls my elbow out, pulls my shoulder out. Pretty soon I'm standing out here in this orientation, and I don't want that because I don't have near as much control as I do if I'm back here. So my push block is always here. I like to start out with pushing this far corner down and hooking my other tool here on the back of my piece to push it through. I've always got that pointed at the fence, and then I'm going to drive my piece through my joiner just like this to take that initial cut off it. What you'll notice here that I've done is I've taken a dark line from my Sharpie and I've indicated on my board a line all the way across. That way, when I'm running it through the planer, I'll know that when that has all disappeared, I've accomplished my objective of making this nice and flat. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to line up my push block and my push stick. I'm going to fire up my machine and I'm going to run it through nice and slow. I'm going to come along with it when it's going through to maintain the best control. Once my guard is closed up and my blade is no longer exposed, then I'm going to go pick up my board and take it back for the second round. As you can see now, I've run this through a couple times. The high points on both sides of the board have been cut off. That cup that I had in there, I'm taking that down, and you can see from our black marks being gone, we've gotten both those edges. So we're progressing towards getting flat. I'll go ahead and get the rest of it done here in just a second. As you can see, we've taken our black marks off all the way across our board. Now it's nice and flat. Easy way to tell that is if you lift it up and drop it on your piece, it almost creates a vacuum in there. You can barely hear it hit, versus when it's not flat, you do the same thing, that's what you get. That's your result. One thing else that you'll notice is when I'm going through here, my orientation is always the same. I want to keep this corner pressed down at all times, because if my board has a little bit of a twist to it, I don't want to change that orientation, start from this side to this side and go back and forth. It'll keep the twist in it rather than taking it out. Now we've got what we call our primary reference surface squared away. It's nice and flat. We want to go to our second. So I've looked at our board here, and I can tell, and we'll mark this again, there's a little bit of a bow in it this way, just by virtue of the way it was cut. So we're going to cut again with our bow up, knocking the high points off both ends until such time as we get it nice and flat. We've got the infeed table here. We've got our fence that we're going to run our piece up against. We're going to take that first reference surface that we created. We're going to run that up against the fence. Hopefully we're at 90 degrees here. This one is set up pretty well, so it should be right at 90. What I want to do in terms of position, again, I want to be close. I want all my weight over my hips and my feet. I want these fingers to be about there when they're pushing this board to the fence, to keep it lined up perfectly on the fence. I don't want it to tip off one way or another, so I'm going to get my fingers down here. I want to put my thumb over the top, so if my piece ever goes away and kicks out on me, my thumb is going to catch on the fence, keeps my hand out of the blade. As I'm coming through here, notice that my backhand is just holding the top of it down, and it's splayed out like this is the way I like to do it. Again, so if something happens and my piece gets kicked out, my hand's going to hit on the fence and catch it and prevent any opportunity for my hands to get involved in the cutters. So here we go. And you can hear from that, and you can see we've made multiple passes, so we've gotten flat here, up on into here. We've still got a little bit of a swale here that's represented by the fact that our black mark is still there. Let's go down and finish that off. One more just to clean it up. There. Now we've accomplished an edge that's perfectly flat and square, and a face that's perfectly flat and square, and they're 90 degrees from each other. That's the best way to start with a piece of wood in terms of getting it flat, square, and able to be used. So now that we've got our first and second reference surfaces nice and flat, and we've done that safely, I want to point out a couple of things that you do not want to do on the jointer. One is you don't ever really want to set it down here and try to cut across an end grain. What it'll do, as often as not, is just going to grab that board and it'll throw it out of the back of your machine like this. It'll literally take it out of your hands. So another thing that you don't want to do is when we're jointing, we're always going long grain and face grain. You don't ever want to go cross grain with something like that. It's too catchy on the grain, and again, there's a potential of taking it out of your hands and throwing it out of your hands. Something else to be mindful of is when you're operating here, if the knife should catch on your piece and throw it out of your hand, it's going to go straight back behind you over here. When you're operating it, don't let anybody be standing there behind you. It can be a little bit of a hazard for them. It's kind of that same old adage, if you don't want to get hit by a bus, don't play in the street. Right there's the street. Stay out of it with yourself, stay out of it with anybody else that you've got. That should give you a pretty good handle on how to run a jointer safely and get through the initial process of turning your wood into beautiful furniture. As part of our demo today, you saw me use 2 push blocks for safety purposes. One that I generally use on the top of my equipment, another one that's got the hook on the back for driving the back side of it through. Absolutely critical that you use these when you're running the jointer. As you'll notice, the original 10 that I was issued with, I've been woodworking for 35 years. I still have them all intact. So please be mindful of safety. Use the tools. We'll set a link for you at the bottom of the screen, so forth, so you can know where to acquire them. Thank you for spending time with me today here in the shop. I look forward to seeing you next time.